Hi everyone, welcome to the Highlights from Ukraine podcast, your daily audio summary of the latest news reported in the Ukrainian media. My name is Artem, and here is the news. For 493 days, Ukraine defends itself against the Russian invasion. Yesterday, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez visited Ukraine, spoke at the Ukrainian parliament's meeting, and met the President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Sánchez announced a €55 million aid package for Ukraine, including €51 million through the World Bank to finance small and medium-sized businesses in Ukraine, reports Espresso. He said another €4 million will be allocated through the UN Development Program to create schools with green and sustainable energy systems in Ukraine. In addition, Sánchez announced the provision of military equipment for Ukraine, namely 4 Leopard tanks, armored personnel carriers, and a mobile field hospital with surgical equipment. The Spanish Prime Minister declared his support for the expansion of Ukraine's political participation in NATO and the creation of the Ukraine-NATO Council, reports European Pravda. Sánchez emphasized that the Western world will have to rethink the security framework to ensure that Ukraine can live without aggression and intimidation. The Prime Minister of Spain also advocated the improvement of practical cooperation between Ukraine and NATO. At the press conference after the meeting with Spanish Prime Minister, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that Ukraine and Spain signed a joint declaration which became the 21st document which talks about support for Ukraine's membership in NATO, reports Ukrainska Pravda. Zelenskyy stated that he awaits a clear signal at the NATO summit in Vilnius that Ukraine will join the alliance after the war. This is what an invitation is for, said Zelenskyy. He also emphasized that Ukraine really needs security guarantees, not as an alternative to membership, but while Ukraine is not a NATO member. According to the German newspaper Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, the agreement on security guarantees for Ukraine can be signed before the NATO summit in Vilnius on 11th and 12th of July. According to the media, the corresponding framework agreement with Germany, France, the UK, and the US is almost ready. Each participating country will sign a separate agreement with Kyiv. The agreement covers weapons, money, military aid, and training. It should allow Kyiv to defend itself without the direct intervention of guarantor countries. Accordingly, Germany wants to propose maintaining the current level of aid until the end of the war. We would really appreciate if you could rate us, ideally with 5 stars, in the apps where you are listening to this podcast: Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcast, and others. This way more people would learn about the highlights from Ukraine and truth about Russia's invasion. Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that Ukraine's partners are delaying the approval of schedules for the training of Ukrainian pilots on F-16 fighter jets. Ukraine's president forwarded the question from the media on when Ukraine can receive the F-16s to Ukraine's partners. We agreed and stressed that we have a coalition of countries that are ready to start training for Ukrainian pilots. There is no training mission schedule. I believe that some partners delayed. I don't know why they do it, said Zelenskyy. In an interview with the Spanish media, Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that Russia may try to remotely blow up the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant after handing it over to Ukraine, if they are forced to deoccupy it, reports Radio Liberty. According to him, this is one of the possible plans they have. The president stressed that when Ukraine regains control over the plant, the International Atomic Energy Agency must check it. Zelenskyy explained that Russia plans to cause an explosion at the nuclear power plant in order to freeze the war. Thank you for listening to the Highlights from Ukraine podcast. We are a commercial initiative of just 2 people, and we need your help to grow. Share information about the podcast, rate us in the app, subscribe to our Patreon. With your support, we are getting better. We call on you to demand from governments of your countries to impose the toughest sanctions possible on Russia and its citizens to stop their invasion of Ukraine.